Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 29th of June 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. That's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which I'm feeling a bit nostalgic for. Still a great game. Unfortunately, it doesn't run all that well on modern systems. You'll notice quite a lot of jerking around, bad frame rate and things like that. But it's playable, and I'm fairly happy with that. You know what, I might actually go back into Wolfenstein 2009, which was one of my favourite shooters ever. Yes, it was that good. Some people disagree with me. They're stupid. This one comes in from Michael. It says, I don't know how much you are still following WoW-related news, but Blizzard recently announced they're getting rid of the 14-day trial and are instead allowing players to play for free up to level 20. All of the restrictions that apply to the 14-day trial still apply, but you can play as long as it takes to get to level 20. Personally, I think this is a better way to do a trial since it gives players a better chance to experience the game than just 14 days. I do think that it's a bit disappointing that they put so many restrictions onto the social aspect of the game, though. After all, WoW is a heavily social game. I was wanting to know your opinion on this. Do you prefer this way of providing a trial or the old way? And do you think that the restrictions on the social side of the game are a bit ridiculous? The restrictions on the social side of the game are there to prevent mass spamming with trial accounts by gold sellers. It's as simple as that. This is why you cannot have nice things. Unfortunately, they found other ways to do that. I mean, they can't stop it. There's too much hacking going on. Until everyone has an authenticator, then you're pretty much never going to be safe from that kind of thing. It sucks, but it is simply the way of it. There is no way around that whatsoever. The whole trial thing, nah, it doesn't faze me in any way, really. I mean, what's the difference between a one that allows you to get level 20 and a 14-day trial when you can do up to level 20 in about 5 hours? I mean, you would have to play so incredibly slowly for this to matter. Unless you just want to keep replaying all the level 20 content, you know, it's probably not a bad idea, because especially if you play the remade starting zones, like, say, if you play Undead through at level 20, that's pretty good. I'm trying to think of any others, because, of course, you only get access to, what was it, TBC races with the trial? Yeah, so the best level 20 starting content is still locked, because, of course, that would be Goblins and Worgen, which kind of sucks. I'm trying to think what of the others are actually reasonable. I mean, the human starting area is all rightish, Dwarf is rubbish, Gnome's pretty good, you know, you can do that. But still, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And it doesn't really faze me one way or the other. I fail to see why people are making such a big deal of it. You've got sites saying, WoW goes free to play. No, it's just a trial without any bloody time limits on it. It's got plenty of other restrictions and limits. Come on. Has not gone free to play. Good God. Sensationalist gaming news. Awful. Absolutely terrible. So yeah. Massive cup, flagard, tankard of care over here for that one. Really not concerned. I think the only thing that's come out of this, which has been fairly reasonable, is the fact that they've now bundled Burning Crusade with Classic WoW. About frickin' time. $20, however, in order to purchase that still, which does seem to be a tad expensive for a game that old. But hey, there you go. That's how it is. It's funny that some people think that it's actually going to make the newer players better, or they get a chance to practice dungeons. Something that various blog sites that don't seem to actually think about anything before posting have said. No, you won't. You can't invite players into a party, for one thing, which makes joining dungeons a pain in the ass. I mean, seriously, how difficult is that going to be? You can't be in a party with anyone above level 20 at any point, so that's a complete pain. I mean, I suppose you could... No, you couldn't even make twinks on this thing, because you can't trade via the Mailbox auction house or via player-to-player trading. You can't do anything with 10 gold, which is the maximum of what you've got. This is the same as it was before. It's a bunch of free advertising. It's very clever by Blizzard, because blogs and silly news sites that don't know what they're talking about will jump on every possible opportunity to make a big deal about this. Blizzard, if anything, are masters of marketing, and I think that's been proven very clearly here. It's the same thing, they just took the time limit off it. But she's got a new hat! This one comes in from Chris that says, I was thinking on the subject of gaming genres when you talked about how some genres work better on PC and others on console. Then I thought about Borderlands. I was never a fan of FPS, however, I was a huge fan of most RPG subgenres. Borderlands was able to mix FPS and action RPG and make it work well together. The question is, do you think developers should start experimenting with mixing genres? It's a thought and it won't always work. If they tried to mix RTS with platformers, that of course wouldn't work. Unless they had some crazy genius who figured that out over the course of 10 years, but the chances of that happening are next to nothing. Funnily enough, I can actually remember a game that did that. In fact, I remember two. Cortex Command and Grim Grimoire. Not so much with Grim Grimoire, that was really just a side-scrolling, but it kind of looked like a platformer. The thing is, they're already doing this. I mean, genres have become more and more homogenized over the course of several years. Pretty much every multiplayer FPS now has RPG elements in it. Leveling up, unlocking stuff, paying points for skills and stuff like that. That's all in those games. So 5, 6 years ago, this would just never have happened. This element of persistence simply wouldn't have been there. Borderlands is a very obvious mix between FPS and action RPG, and as you said, for the most part, it does work well. I think that developers need to just have a vision for a game and not start out with, we want to mix this genre with this genre. What they should start out with is a concept, and they should think, how are we best going to achieve that concept? Can we do it by sticking with a single genre? Would it work better if we splashed in elements from other genres? They shouldn't start off with the idea that they're going to make some kind of Franken game. That isn't a good idea at all, and that often ends up being more gimmicky than anything else because it also tends to be part of their marketing strategy. They will market it by saying, oh, we developed this from the ground up as a mix of this and this, isn't this crazy and unique and new? And I would just like to buy a game on the basis of a really cool concept, and the mechanics of the game suit the concept down to a T. Deus Ex, prime example of that as far as I'm concerned. It has the mechanics it needs in order to be a successful Deus Ex game, not a shooter RPG action thingy. We don't need that, and that's not the best way to develop a game. It's built around this concept that we want a fairly open, free world, and it's going to have a lot of story in it, which generally means you have to talk to people, so it's going to have RPG elements in there, and we want you to be able to play through it multiple times and experience it in different ways and approach the game in different ways, so we put in a skill system and an augment system to make sure that every time you play through, you are going to play it differently, because you can't get everything at once. So all of these elements within that game are there for a reason, and they're there to make the game better. That's not what they started off thinking about. Ooh, how many other elements from these genres can we throw into the pot right here? But whenever it comes around and whenever it actually works well, I'm always really happy with it. I mean, Savage and Savage 2 are good examples of a mixture of a third-person action game with first-person shooting elements, with RTS elements and a little bit of RPG in there for good measure. I'm a big fan of that. Very, very big fan of that. I think Savage and Savage 2 are absolutely astonishing. Natural Selection, another good example, and hopefully Natural Selection 2 when it actually comes out. I don't have the beta for that, but it's a little bit weird at the moment. We'll see. Hopefully they improve it. But whatever the case, it's a good idea to throw in elements from genres when it makes sense. It's not a good idea to create a Franken game from the very start, in my opinion. This one comes in from Harrison. It says, hey TB, I just bought Infamous 2 recently and finished on both stories. I love the amount of choice. May it be not much, but the decision it gave you between good and evil was great. I love the way it goes, but I rarely ever see it in any other game. My question is, how come developers don't give you that much choice in some or most games on console or PC? In StarCraft 2, I remember it gave you a few missions with choices to join or kill a person, and that was amazing. Are developers just scared to give a player that amount of choice, or they just flat out refuse to let us choose? What are your thoughts on the matter? I'd love to hear your feedback. Infamous 2 is a weird one. If you watched the Zero Punctuation cartoon today, and I hesitate to call it reviews because generally they aren't, Yahtzee talked about the choice in the game being kind of artificial and dumb, and I would have to kind of agree with him on that one. The way that they've made good and evil doesn't make any sense most of the time. I mean, for God's sake, you can be evil by beating up or incinerating street performers, and while that's kind of funny, it doesn't tie into the game, because I don't want to kill the guy that's playing the smooth jazz in the corner. That's a terrible idea. Maybe I might kill mine, but not the guy with the smooth jazz. And when they give you choices, they always seem so contrived and stupid. It's like, are you an evil, maniacal bastard, or are you a frickin' angel? I don't like that. And often, I want to make a choice that's a little bit more grey, and I believe he said something on the lines of, choices should be presented with the evil choice often being the more convenient, but possibly more risky, and of course, morally ambiguous. And I would tend to agree with that on a base level. I think, to me, it's more about making morality a little bit less black and white, and in Infamous, it very much is black and white. I have the game myself. I've played probably about 6 or 7 hours of it thus far on Infamous and Infamous 2. I didn't play much of Infamous, but Infamous 2 is a really, really good game in a lot of different ways, but I always found the moral choices in that series to be kind of dumb. I have no real reason not to do the mass heal missions, for instance. It's like, oh, I suppose it's mildly inconvenient, but doing a medical emergency mission takes about 20 seconds, and now that I have the mass heal, it takes 2 seconds. I can heal them all in one shot. So, to me, I don't see the point in being evil. And also, that game seems to punish you for sort of going down the middle route. If you want to be kind of neutral, you just lose out on everything. You don't gain access to all the fantastic powers on either spectrum, so there's no reason to play it neutral at all. I think that game developers, BioWare is a good example, actually. They've got a bit better recently, but certainly in things like KOTOR, and even in Jade Empire, where they claimed that the way of the open palm and the way of the closed fist were just sort of yin and yang, and they weren't inherently good and evil. They were still good and evil, honestly. It's like, punch an orphan. That's the way of the closed fist. Like, no, that's not how it works at all. Admittedly, BioWare have got a bit better lately, but still, there are a lot of devs that just can't approach morality properly, and then there are some that actually, to some degree, go too far. CD Projekt, for instance. The Witcher was criticized for having really great moral choices, but they were all bad. And people's like, well, this is just contrived to make sure there's no right answer. And it was happening all the time. So, I think CD Projekt probably does it the best, though, still, especially with Witcher 2. That's absolutely fantastic in terms of moral choices. But when it comes to choice in games, you've got to consider the fact that it's also a lot of development time you've got to put into making those choices work. And if you make a choice and it affects the rest of the game, that is a lot of coding that has to be done. So I don't think that things should necessarily be sacrificed to make moral choices meaningful. But if you're gonna put a moral system in the game, it should be more than a blue and red bar. And that's, let's be honest, what most moral choices and morality systems in games currently are. I think they have to evolve way past that. This one comes in from Alex. It says, in your Mailbox episode of 2006, you had said that the blame was on the developers for not being able to carry more than a few weapons at once during a game. As you always do, you gave solid backup for why you thought this, but I still feel the need to mention another side towards that argument. I, and more than likely many other gamers, like to have a sense of realism in games. It would feel strange if somehow in COD, as an example, the average soldier could carry a shotgun, rocket launcher, pistol, and an assault rifle. That just wouldn't make any sense to me. I also feel in a multiplayer setting, only being able to carry a limited number of weapons allows for a more strategic look at the game, instead of just walking into battle with every weapon possible. I'd have to pick and choose what fits the situation. Do I need a long-range weapon or a medium-range weapon? Will I need to be fast, or can I sacrifice that for a bit more firepower? I can understand why developers only allow for 2 weapons when I look at it that way. Do you think that's viable reasoning, or just me simply looking to cover for the developers? Your thoughts on the matter's entirety would be appreciated as well. I have no idea what you mean by that, but whatever the case, we can talk about that. The whole realism thing doesn't really pass muster with me, and the reason is that you're talking about realism in Call of Duty. Well, I like my Call of Duty to be realistic. Now, allow me to just hide behind this cinder block while I regenerate the various bullet wounds I have in my face. Yeah, I don't really buy into that, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work out. There's no real reason for, say, a Call of Duty game to have the ability to carry 4 assault rifles or whatever. That's fine. And there are some multiplayer experiences that do not benefit from having access to multiple weapons at a time. Any class-based multiplayer game, for instance, generally having 2 weapons or 3 is probably fine. I mean, hell, TF2 does it an awful lot. You've got your primary weapon, you've usually got a secondary, which tends to be a shotgun of some sort, and then you've got a melee weapon. And sometimes you'll have something else, but you know, that's okay, that's fine. If the game's designed around that, then that's cool. The whole strategic choice thing, I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, because let's be honest, say in Call of Duty, you're very restricted if you choose to, say, pick a shotgun or akimbo SMGs or something like that. You have to fight in one particular way. There's no other way to do it. I mean, I can't take akimbo scorpions and fight someone at range who has a FAMAS. It's just not going to work. The same with a shotgun or anything along those lines. So in reality, this limited choice of weapons is actually restricting your playstyle. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I mean, for instance, I might want to just be a short-range guy, and I'll adapt my tactics accordingly for that. And that's fine. There are some maps where that simply doesn't work, honestly. I mean, jungle, that just doesn't work at all, in my honest opinion. There's too many wide-open areas. But yeah, I can do it on Nuketown, or I can do it on Relay to some degree. I can't remember the names of the maps. But yeah, anything with a lot of corners, or a lot of indoor fighting, or urban fighting, or things like that, I can do it with a shotgun. But on the larger open maps, I'll probably want to be using an assault rifle or whatever. So it's a bit of a two-edged sword, but really when it comes to the single player, it comes down to what kind of game it is. If you're gonna play realistic war sim, fine. And I'm not calling Call of Duty a realistic war sim because it isn't, but it's a pseudo-realistic war shooter. I'm okay with that. But then you look at stuff like Resistance, and Resistance allows you to carry more than that, or Red Faction Armageddon, you can carry more than that, Serious Sam, you can carry more than that, Painkiller, all that kind of good stuff. Hell, we turn to Castle Wolfenstein, as you can very clearly see right there. You have to ask from a design perspective, does this add to the game, or does this subtract from the game? Does this give you options, or does it take them away? Does it make it more fun or less fun? In the case of Duke Nukem Forever, for instance, it clearly makes it less fun, and I've explained that point in exhaustive detail. I still think that, generally speaking, the two-weapon system at this point is used, one, to make control methods easier, and two, to have a greater degree of control over the player. Which is the same reason why regenerating health exists, for instance, because they'll know at any given time that you either have full health or no health. It's a binary system, and anything in between is so incidental and only lasts for a couple of seconds that it's irrelevant to the whole design of the game. It depends what game it is, really. I do feel that there are too many games with two-weapon systems, and unless a developer can justify why they've made that decision, and unless it actually adds to the game as opposed to takes away from it, then as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't be there. Giving one final example, Crysis 2 does allow you to hold a rocket launcher as well as two primary weapons, which is quite nice, but pistols count as primaries, and as you've probably seen in my gameplay footage, there doesn't seem to be any reason to have a pistol as opposed to a frickin' assault rifle or shotgun or anything like that, so I really don't know why that is, especially when you're running around in a goddamn nanosuit. Okay folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you for watching the Mailbox. Email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. I'll see you next time.